Okay, so you see on the title, 2 Samuel 11, David and Bathsheba. I did David's sins with the S underline, because that's what we're going to do tonight as we go through the text. We'll read just a chunk of the story at a time, but what I would like for us to do for our conversation tonight, I would like to itemize David's mistakes. And this is not itemizing mistakes for the sake of pointing the finger at somebody who made a mistake and saying, wow, what a loser. Look at, you really messed this up, David. It's what Mark prayed about. I think if we look at David's mistakes, that we can see a lot of the same kinds of mistakes in our own lives. Or at least we can get some idea of how things progress, and one thing leads to the next, and the idea would be, let's not do that. Let's do better. Let's learn from it and not make some of these same mistakes. What should we do? What could we do better to not fall into this same trap? So let's start with just a real short reading. I guess it doesn't have to be long. It gets bad in a hurry. Would somebody please read chapter 11, verses 1 through 4? Okay. Verse 5 also, please, just to finish it.
And the woman conceived, and she sent and told David, I am pregnant.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Thanks for reading that. Okay, so in those 5 verses, what mistakes do you see? I don't want to make my list first. I'll click the button here in just a second and I'll show you my list. But my list is not exactly this, but it basically goes verses 1, 2, 3, and 4. But what's yours first, like mistakes? Morgan, what do you see?
If we're in battle and we didn't go with him.
Yeah, so that's my first one. So I'm going to click it here. There are a lot of people on this one who would say, well, maybe he didn't have to go. He's the king. And there is going to be a time later in 2 Samuel where Israel gets ready to go out to battle, and all Israel says to David, no, you are too important. You stay back here. But, I mean, when you read verse 1, doesn't it sound like the author? I mean, just listen to this. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle. So, I mean, it's kind of like you can say something in such a way that you make your point. So here's the sentence. In the spring, when kings go out to battle, this is just what kings do when you're a king. David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. So you're getting this picture like, this is when the kings go out to battle, but David sent everybody else. I mean, it's kind of lathering it up. That's what I'm saying. When you read it, it's kind of like David should have been there. In the spring of the year, the time when the kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. And they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. And then this is it. But David remained at Jerusalem. I guess I could see a person who says that's maybe not a valid point, but when I read verse 1, it seems more than clear to me that this is clearly the point. David was not where he should have been. What do you think about that? What do you say? I can't hear. Hold on. For all of our visitors, I'm deaf. So you can either talk loud enough, or we have this big cheerleading horn that we make you talking to. I'm only joking. No, go ahead.
It wouldn't be in there if it wasn't important. And he as the leader, should be leading his group.
And yeah. And you remember also, that's why Israel chose a king in the first place with Saul. Who's going to lead us out to battle? Go back to 2 Samuel 5. In 2 Samuel 5, we made a big deal of this in our last class. 2 Samuel 5 is like the major milestone where David becomes king. This is a big deal. Verse 1, then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron. In verse 3, it says they anointed David king over Israel. And then verse 5, he reigned over Judah 7 years. He reigned over Israel 33 years. And then look at verse 6. David is king, verse 6. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who said to David, you will not come in here, but the blind and the lame will ward you off, thinking David cannot come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion. And then if you go back, like, you've got David and Goliath, you've got David the warrior who's defeating all of his enemies, and then we come to 2 Samuel 11, and this is the time when kings go out to war, but David didn't. And so, number one, he wasn't where he was supposed to be. There's got to be a principle in that. How many times has somebody or yourself, how many times have we got ourselves into trouble because we weren't where we were supposed to be in the first place?
Well, in verse 2, doesn't really seem like he's very busy. Rose from his couch, and he's just walking around the king's roof, just looking at what's going on. Like, well, what's going on outside? I haven't been outside yet today. Let me go look at what the kingdom is doing.
Yeah, I think it's worse than that. Look at 2. It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch. I know, it just sounds bad. Like, these first couple verses just sound really bad. And here's our principle, I think. It applies to all of us. And I could give you a million examples of this. But the thing that I think of now, hold on, I did turn it on. The thing that I think of now is being a parent and telling my kids over and over and over again, just stay away. Just don't go there. Because we know, right? The parents, probably because we've learned the hard way and made the mistakes. If you're just not where the trouble is in the first place, then you don't have to worry about the trouble. And so, I'm not going to beat David up. I'm not going to say that he was doing something sinful or that he was looking for trouble, but we can definitely take one principle away from the start of this chapter, in that David was definitely not where he should have been, and it just led to some horrible, horrible things in this story. Last word on that one? You can come back to it if you think of something else. But
The headspace.
yeah, I'm going to add that in my notes, the snowball. This is a snowball. But yeah, that's what this was all about, what you just did. That's why the S is underlined. Look at verse 2, the second part of verse 2. I'm putting the first part with verse 1. It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch. Let me tell you something while I'm here. I think of something every single time I read this verse. My dad, he's had some things in my life. I'm this close to saying them out loud as an example, but there's no way I'm going to tell you what they are, because I know good and well that you'll do some of them to me. But one of the things that my dad does that just makes me clench my teeth and roll up my fist every single time I talk to him on the phone in the middle of the day or whatever, I say, okay, bye. Dad's way of saying okay, bye is, all right, go back to bed. And it just irritates me when he says it to me. That's what I think of with this. It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house. Okay, number 2, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. What's your principle there? And let me say this before you do your principle. I'm not saying that David made a sinful error here. Could have happened to anyone. This thing is not like, I don't think the text is pointing us to David sitting on his roof with a telescope trying to look in people's windows. I wish that I would have done this now. One time when I was preaching about this, remember, some of you will remember, I put a picture from the church in Balanagar, India, where I was, and the baptistry is up on the roof, and we went up on the roof of this building, and on the roof you can just see the city, and there's like living spaces on the roofs, and you can see in people's windows and all this stuff. And I was up there and I thought, that's how it happened. You're just up here on the roof to baptize someone innocently, and you can see in people's windows. So here's David up on the roof, and he sees this woman taking a bath, and she's very beautiful. What's the principle? Have you ever? I'm going to give you a super softball here, like everybody. It would be safer for me to say, have you not? Because I feel 1,000% sure that this is true for everybody. Have you ever been on the computer or Facebook or Instagram or something like that, and you weren't seeking it out, but you saw something that you should not have seen? I mean, I know that it's happened to me. I know that it's happened to my kids. And what you say to your kids is you hand them the phone and you say, never, ever, ever. I have software on here and I'm spying on you, and I will cut you down if I ever find you doing any of this stuff. But then you know, I'm going to see it, and you say, when that happens, what do? First thing. You close your phone, you come and you let me know that it happened, because I'm going to get an alert about it anyway. And so my kids, they'll come, and Luke has come and he said, I wasn't looking for it. I saw it was there, and it's like, okay, we learned a lesson. Here's how we're going to move forward on some of this stuff. But I think that we can see clearly. Look at Proverbs 5. There's a couple things in Proverbs that talk about, especially this is a dad talking to his son, which is a special sort of a thing when it comes to behavior with women and what to do and what not to do. Proverbs chapter 5. Starting in verse 1, you can see the heading over the text. It says, warning against adultery. But verse 8, the dad tells his son, keep your way far from her. Do not go near the door of her house. Don't even walk down that street. Because if you put a young boy in this situation, and I know she lives there, I'm just going to walk by. Just going to walk by. It's kind of like, remember, I don't know if they still have these things. Remember Victoria's Secret in the mall? It's like, but then he will go, don't even walk down the street, is what the dad says. Stay 1,000,000 miles away from that place. Chapter 6 and verse 25. We're still in the practical warning section here. In verse 20 it says warning against adultery. Verse 25. Do not desire her beauty in your heart. This one's really important. Don't dwell on it. Don't dwell, don't keep it in your mind. Don't run it through your noggin like, oh, I'm just thinking about it. No! Don't, that's where it starts. Don't desire her beauty in your heart. Do not let her capture you with her eyelashes. Verse 27. Can a man carry fire next to his chest and his clothes not be burned? Or can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched? David made a mistake. It was an accident. He saw a woman. But I think the problem is that he didn't do what he should have done next. What happened was he lingered. And all of these things, he took fire up next to his chest, and what's happened with fire? He got burned.
It was so easy for it.
Yeah, it's a bad situation to be in. I'll send you these if you want. I'm not going to take the time to turn to each one. But this is Paul's message again and again. 1 Corinthians 6 and verse 18. Flee immorality. That's the common word in each one of these. What is flee? Run away from it. Flee immorality. 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 14. Flee from idolatry. 1 Timothy 6, 10 and 11. Flee from the love of money. 2 Timothy 2 and verse 22. Flee from youthful lust. You can't linger at sin's door. So I think these two are super helpful for us because we're not looking at David at this point and saying he's a bad guy who did something necessarily wrong. These are mistakes that every single one of us can make, no matter what. Yeah. And when you read that passage, I always think about the thing that Martin Luther said about, I can't keep the birds from flying over my head. I'm going to see women. But I can keep them from building a nest in my hair. The lustful intent. There's a huge difference in making the mistake and lingering and dwelling, which is what David did. Huge mistake. I got some other ones if you're writing notes down here. Just things in passing for this. Romans 13:14. Put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. Don't open the door. Make no provision. Don't even let it have an opportunity. And then Dave, your James passage. James 1 and verses 14 through 16. The conception, the birth, it starts with a bad idea. It gives birth to sin. It grows into something. That's where we are right now. So I think we can see this mistake. Let's not do this. And here's my takeaway. My takeaway is run away. When that happens, run away. And there's Bible examples of this. Joseph was in a situation. He ran for the hills, man. That's the lesson, unless you want to see where this goes. And David found out it doesn't go somewhere good. Okay, next. Where are we? We did verse 2, right? Verse 3. David sent and inquired about the woman. I'm going to do this one a little bit more than that. The David sent and inquired about the woman, that might go with the second one. I see it. I linger. I ask. I'm just asking about her. What's the harm? I'm just asking about her. But then look at what happens after that. David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, David, is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? If David had made a mistake up to this point that was totally accidental and he found himself caught in a trap that he didn't want to be in, this is his out. Somebody says, David. I mean, implied, these are not the words, but the implication is, you should not be doing this. He had the out.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but isn't Uriah one of his mighty men?
Okay, so let's do this. There's like,
And then I was also going to say, isn't Ahithophel her grandfather?
Yeah. And 2, you got one more? There's 3. There's like 3 levels of gross to this. And I'll show you. Mark a note here next to that verse that talks about, is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah? Go to 2 Samuel 23. 2 Samuel 23, I think that we're at the last chapter, or really close to the last chapter at this point. And starting in verse 8, see the heading above verse 8 where it says David's mighty men? These are like, David is the leader of an army. But these guys are with him. These are David's mighty men. These are like, I don't know if you would call them generals or not. But these are the guys who do this stuff together. And so, yeah, verse 39, it ends in this way. The last of the 37 mighty men, Uriah the Hittite. So, let's just do this. It's not like David didn't know who she was. Hey, David, isn't that Uriah's wife? You know, one of your mighty men, one of the guys who sticks his neck out for you all the time, isn't that his wife? And then, what's the verse? Verse 28. If you go back to verse 28 in this same chapter, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam. Oh, no. It's not in verse 28, is it? 34. What is it? 34. In 34, you've got Eliam is listed as one of the mighty men. That's the third one that you didn't get. Uriah's, the husband, is a mighty man. The dad is a mighty man. And then this is one worth highlighting and knowing in your Bible. In verse 34, it says, Eliam, the son of Ahithophel the Gilonite. Now, we haven't met Ahithophel yet. But later, what we're going to find out is that Ahithophel is David's most trusted advisor. One of the things that it's going to say in the text later on when we read about this is that the words of Ahithophel were regarded as the words of God in David's day. So, I don't want to put levels on this. Like, I don't want to be unbiblical and speak outside of what the Bible is talking about here. If I make a mistake, I've made a mistake. I should not have made a mistake. But isn't it just like turning up the volume a little bit? Is if I make this mistake out there versus if I make this mistake in here with my people? Like that's next level. And then, what if it's next level with David where it's like Uriah, mighty man, Eliam, mighty man, Ahithophel, your most trusted advisor, her grandpa. And I can't help but think about David, who a couple classes ago restrained his men from killing Saul. And he said, this is not the right thing to do. And then David, who was restrained himself by Abigail, who said, David, this is not the right thing to do. And I think the lesson here, at least the principle that I'm taking away from this one is, David would not be restrained. He wouldn't listen. I'll give you, if you've got something to say, that's fine. But how many times, man, this is just, David and Bathsheba is such a terrible story. But I see myself having made so many of these different mistakes. How many times have you been walking towards the wrong thing and someone grabs you and says, don't do it, and you pull your arm away and you go forward anyway, only to think later, I should have listened when I was told? Major problem. David would not be restrained. What do you think? Comments there? Cindy? Yeah. That's the way that I say that. David was in that spot in his head where he just did not care. He saw the thing that he wanted, and that was it. He didn't care. That's a dangerous place to be. Now, see, I don't. Okay. This is a big. I'm going to stick with the text on this one, and that's just an unknown. But I will tell you, and I would have thought that too, except for standing on that roof in India, I could have seen a woman in her bathtub. I mean, it's just one of those things. Like, I don't know. I don't know. It's just one of those things. So yeah, it would have been cool if she would have not been seen in the first place, but she was. Verse 4. This has got to be one. David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. I listed that one as what the Bible refers to as a high-handed sin. Whenever you go through the sacrifices in Leviticus and Numbers is where you're going to find the language for the high-handed sin. Leviticus talks about sacrifices that are it uses the language, sacrifices to atone for the unintentional sin, which is to say, it's not right, but we all make mistakes. But this situation is not, we all make mistakes. This situation is, I had every opportunity to run. Somebody even told me that I shouldn't be doing this thing, but I don't care. I'm going to march forward anyway and do the thing that I'm not supposed to do. That's a different level. Like, this is not an unintentional sin. That's the point that I'm making. This is, I know it's wrong and I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. And that is the dangerous place that I was referring to just a second ago. If you ever find yourself in that spot, well, I guess I don't know what to tell you, but this would be my best advice. You got to call someone that is close and that you trust and say, hey, I'm in a bad place right now. Like, we're beyond restraining with words. I need you to take care of me here. Because if you get yourself into that, I know it's wrong, but I don't care spot, boy, that's it. We're like, no, we're not at the edge of the cliff. We done jumped off the cliff at this point. We're headed down to the rocks at the bottom at this point. Okay. Anything on that one? High-handed sin. Yeah, and the same thing with Nebuchadnezzar. He's about to get humbled. I got a couple more. We're not going to have time to read the text. She gets pregnant. He calls Uriah home from battle and says, go home and see your wife. And then you can go back to battle. In the religious world that we live in today, I guess it's not just the religious world. That's just the world that I'm in, and that I think is far worse when it happens. We have seen the mistake is bad, but if you were intentionally trying to take that mistake and turn it up to 100, try and cover it up, because it's only going to get worse. The cover-up makes it worse. So here is the cover-up. In verses 10 through 12, Uriah's integrity, I don't know how you can read these verses. If you're David, I don't know how you could live with yourself. David says, go home and see your wife. Verse 10. When they told David Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, "Have you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?" And Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing." And that just takes what David's done, and when you contrast it with a man of integrity, and that David's done this to his wife, it's worse. And then I listed this one, verse 13. So then David says, "Hey, cool. Let's have some wine." He's going to get him drunk. And once he gets drunk, maybe then he'll go home. And even in that situation, his integrity rose above David's in this. And maybe you can help me with this one. But the cover-up seems like one bad thing. I can't think of the word. The cover-up seems like one bad thing. But then trying to instigate the cover-up by getting him drunk seems like a next-level cover-up. There's got to be a word for that. I keep coming to sedition, and I looked up the dictionary definition of sedition, and that's not right. It's not the right word. But I don't know what the word for this is, but hey, come on home. Go see your wife. No, I don't want to. Oh, hey, here, have a cup of wine. Let's get you drunk. That's next. Like, that's different. And then he says, in this last part, he writes the letter, sends the letter by the hand of Uriah, because he knows he can be trusted. Hey, give this letter to Joab. And it says, Joab, put Uriah on the front lines so that he gets killed by the enemy army. And Uriah gets killed. Joab sends a messenger back. And David gets mad about it. He says, "Why did he get so close to the lines?" And the messenger says, "Well, Uriah was also killed." And David goes, "Got it. Mission accomplished." I call this murder. I think the technical definition would be conspiracy to murder, but David has blood on his hands. This is murder, what he did. I saw this on Twitter this week. Any sin left unchecked always leads to more sin. It started with a guy who wasn't where he should have been, and it ends in adultery and murder. Let's do Morgan and then Lisa. That's a really good one. David's sin was not a sin that only affected David. Lisa and then Emma. Yeah, I can't ever remember it, so I wrote it down. But it's one of those things. Sin will keep you longer than you want to stay, take you farther than you want to go, and cost you more than you intended to pay. And I got something to say about that, but I don't have time. And that's my closing thought about this. Okay, Ryan, why have we done? Well, I mean, this is the text. We're studying the text. This is the text. But here's the thing. David was a man after God's own heart. And we've already seen it in action. And I think this is the scary part. And this is the thing to take away from this. If David can make this mistake, any one of us is capable of the same error. And so we look at this list, and I think to myself, and you know what? As if this isn't bad enough, wait until we're done with the last class. Here's David made a mistake. The whole rest of this class is just going to be this horrible string of consequences that David has to suffer. God forgave him of his sin. There are some horrible consequences that go with this. And so here's the thing that I'm taking. If any one of us is capable of any of these mistakes, I think a nice healthy dose of fear, and to say, okay, don't be in the places where I'm not supposed to be. If the bird flies over my head, get the tennis racket out and run that sucker off, like flee. In all of these different things that we've been talking about here. When people are trying to say to you, hey, this is wrong, don't do this thing, listen, don't just press on. I mean, He could have stopped. He could have stopped 5 different times before it ended in murder. So thank you for your participation tonight. I appreciate it. If you want to prepare for Sunday, on Sunday we're going to be talking about David's repentance. When you make horrible mistakes, what's the next right thing to do? And so we'll talk about that.